was a very personal essay for me to write. And it really is a love story. So I think we found during the pandemic, which I found before the pandemic, but some of us are finding during the pandemic that love can come from really unexpected places when you're in a down space. So I wasn't in a down space, but the person that I write about, my neighbor, he's had a rough life here and there, but he still was able to come out and come to me and offer me something that I responded to in him, and it ended up being love. So what can you say? So the pandemic has, in a way, made our spaces smaller, but it's almost made our connections more important. So I'm thinking to myself during this really dreadful time in a lot of ways, it has made me really more grateful that I had a wide social network, because now, even though I can't access it physically so much, I can still access it emotionally. So I'm hearing from my friends in different parts of the country, in different parts of the world. I get messages from a lot of people that I have met due to my other work from other countries, India, the Middle East, Africa. I get messages, how are you guys doing? What's going on over there? How are you? They're concerned. For me, a relatively privileged woman in Southern California, they are concerned for me and they're scared for me. And that is really also something that's flipped the script, but it's also really a wonderful expression of love. And it makes me miss them more too, because right now I would be in the Middle East speaking, I would be in these other countries, but unfortunately I've had to postpone these events, these invitations. But it's just showed me that, wow, there really is a network of communion and a network of love from people that maybe we don't expect that we are going to have that much in common with, but it's not about that. It's about who you are and who they are and what you can find in common.
Beautiful. Okay. Um, because so much of your work, not that it was canceled, because you said you've been doing a lot of it online, but you weren't able to travel. So has being home for so long had been either like a help towards creativity and diving deep, or do you feel like it's made it harder to be writing and in the flow because you're such a traveler? Have you noticed one impact or the other?
It's been a little bit depressing, like other writers have felt. Luckily for me, my book came out before the pandemic, but I was really getting more into the swing of things because April is Autism Awareness Month and summer was a big thing for me. So I had a lot of events planned. I bought boxes of books for those events. There was a citywide event. There was an event in Los Angeles. There was an event in the Midwest. So all these things. And so I had these boxes of books for the event that was the city was going to help with, and boom. So that's all gone, and we kept postponing it. And now I realize I don't know what's going to happen to those boxes of books, but maybe someday there will be a use for them. So has it really, so that was depressing. It wasn't helpful to me at all. I can't pretend that it was, but at least I was able to make some really good connections with people still on the internet and still have events and things, but it's not the same. But as far as the pandemic overall for my creativity, I suppose what it's done in a way is anchor me more to the natural world in my own area where I'm living. So one of the things you can do safely, of course, is take a lot of walks. So I've been walking and walking and walking, not only through my own really beautiful area in Orange County, California. I'm really lucky to be close to canyons and trails and hills and the ocean, but also in some of the neighborhoods. And I love architecture. So I'm walking through neighborhoods. And they're not fancy neighborhoods, a lot of them. They're old, they're modest neighborhoods, but I find them really interesting. So I'm really able to get out and indulge my interest in architecture, my interest in just how people live in different spaces and different places. So conversely, it's me more here and making me think about, I am now living in Southern California without the opportunity to leave, which is how a lot of people live their life. And I used to live my life like that constantly. I mean, I'm not from a fancy background, very old traditional Virginia background. And so I was on a plane until I was in my early 20s, like the way that typically live, where you anchored me to the space. And it's made me grateful for having outside space, which a lot of people don't have. It also made me think more about California versus other parts of the world. So that's, it's really not part of my writing creativity yet. Whether something will come out of it, it's possible. And if it
Okay.
did, I would probably try to work that into the fiction, into the novel that I'm thinking of doing.
Okay, that makes sense. Um, Very different direction, this question. And feel free to punt it. But because of your background, at one point you worked at the Pentagon. Well, I
Yes.
imagine some time ago. So this last week, in the middle of an uprising in the Capitol, was that bring back some memories of working there? Did it have a particular resonance for you, having actually been so close to some of that in the
Absolutely,
past?
it did. When I was working at the Pentagon, it was a long time ago. I started my career there actually after college. And at that time, security, it was in place, but it was being upgraded. So I remember when they did start putting in metal detectors and that people would have to go through them if you didn't have your badge that day. If you had your badge, you didn't have to, but if you didn't, you had to go through them. So, and you couldn't get out of that. I mean, you had to do it. And there are rules about spaces. There are rules about where you do go and where you don't go with what level of authorization. And I went to the Capitol sometimes for my job, and I went all over because I actually worked my way up to become the assistant and then the acting editor of the newspaper of the Pentagon in the Military District of Washington. So I was reporting on stories from all over that. I would go to all kinds of installations. And then later I worked for aerospace, very more classified spaces that I went into and was adjacent to. And I remember once going into a building where I had to hold a special lantern in my hand because I wasn't at that level of clearance. So I had to walk around with a lantern in my hand, showing everybody uncleared person.
Mm.
So seeing and I'm from DC originally, and I actually lived there too before I moved to California. And so seeing the security that is traditionally in place for large events and even regular process, and then seeing the casual way that it was set up before the recent events of January 6th, and seeing how people just intruded into that space without the proper vetting and the proper barriers and everything was absolutely shocking to me. I watched it was unfolding. So of course I'm thinking, how is this happening? This is not what I knew. I mean, certainly things change over time, but the security has gotten tighter there, not looser from what I understand. So that is just something that is a major problem. Things were breached, things happened that shouldn't have happened. And I guess we are humbled now because we see things can happen in our own country that we don't identify with our own country. And I always think that's interesting when we look at other countries sometimes with the sense of being superior to them. But when something happens in our own country that we don't think can happen here, it's a real wake up call that we are all alike. We all face similar problems and we all have to be vigilant in order to take care of our security and our liberty in every country.
Got it. You are really good at speaking very like off the cuff, such a complete answer. Um, there are a couple other things I wanted to ask. One was being so much in the space of mothers, especially parents that have kids that are autistic, or anywhere in the
Neurodivergent.
yeah, I was even gonna go
Challenge.
bigger and say like physical and emotional needs that are really usually getting extra attention if they were in traditional school. So
Yes.
it could be physical, could be emotional, it could be learning differences. But that I've been very concerned as a therapist about that group of kids and about those families that are trying to become homeschool teachers out of the blue. And I've seen some articles about it, but since it's so much your space, have you had a sense of how people are managing with, if they do have K through 12 grade kids that would normally be getting a lot more support at school? And what's this like
I
for them?
have. Yes, I have. And because I hear from a lot of families in other countries and in America. So I hear from a lot of families and I see what they're going through. And then, of course, there's been a little bit of reporting on it, not a ton, but there's been some reporting on how the challenges of the pandemic are triply, quadruply, sometimes infinitely magnified among people with children with autism and then other significant support needs. So some of the issues are like in England, where I actually did an 8-week radio show recently on an English radio station. I was hearing and reading that they're only allowed to have 1 hour a day out on exercise when they're in the certain tier of lockdown, and that some of the autism parents are like, hey, my kid can not only go outside 1 hour a day, he's going to raise heck in the rest of the house. You know, he needs to be out. He can't be just sitting around. And he, because people may not understand, but some of these children cannot engage with the typical time passing methods that
Mhm.
children that function more typically can. They need more distraction. They need physical exercise. They need to be doing what they need to do for their health. And so if those needs aren't met, it can become a dangerous situation for the parents or siblings, because the frustration comes out in children that can't get what they want. And it can be, it's not their fault, but they can actually become aggressive. So that's one of the issues. Other issues are that I mean, I'm a real proponent of mask wearing, but there are a few type of children that are challenged enough that they can't seem to tolerate it on them. And so some of the moms are saying, I need to get him to his medical appointment, but I don't know if he's going to put that on or not.
Mhm.
So there's a struggle about that. I mean, I don't think there's a good answer to that.
Mhm.
Perhaps eventually we'll get a facility built where a person like that can be brought safely right into that one little facility, you know,
Mhm.
from the car to that one little room, and you know, whatever. But those are a very small number. I'm not saying it's a big number. I'm not having an opinion one way or another. Like I said, I'm a proponent of mask wearing, but there are a few cases like
Mhm.
that that are difficult. And then the screen thing, yeah, the kind of the thing is, oh, children with autism, they love screens. They're so routine. They will just love it. They'll love it. Well, a lot of them don't love. They like screens that they want to do, but to ask them to sit and attend, because the attending, paying attention function can be very challenged, super hard. So you have them you're trying to now be the special education teacher or the regular education teacher as the parent. You're trying to be the aide. You know, you're trying to do the work of 3 or 4 people and then live your own life on top of that and be the mother, so, or the father. So
Mhm.
it's just really, really hard. And there are even other issues about food. Someone who had been following my work for years in India on camel milk and autism, this actually became a big international story. She had run out of camel milk, and her son had autism. He won't tolerate hardly any of, he will not tolerate much other food. And so, and he needed that. And so she couldn't get it anymore shipped to her. So she tweeted, and she had tagged me, but I didn't really notice it. And then she tweeted like a railway manager, a very high level executive in India, help. He responded, they actually made a special train stop to bring the camel from somebody that's in my book to
Mhm.
this mother in a city and gave it. And it was such a huge story. And then all these other parents are like, I need it too. I need it too. Some of them have contacted me. And so it became like a big story where they actually set up a train to help these children. So my
Yeah.
husband likes to joke, see, you stopped a train in India, you changed the train in India. I'm like, well, I didn't really do that, but it's nice that there was a role in that to make
Mhm.
that happen. So